Hi, I'm Ashley McElwain, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder and CEO of Foundation Restoration. Welcome to Foundation Restoration's Real Talk podcast, where you'll find real people discussing real issues while offering real help at the intersection of clinical expertise and a biblical perspective. We're so glad you've joined us. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Real Talk podcast. Super excited, as always, to be together. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're continuing our series on how the use of technology and social media contributes to anxiety and just in general our mental health. We are looking at just how we're plugged in, but often stressed out. And so last episode in part one, we talked about just kind of what anxiety is, looking at some overall statistics related to anxiety. And then we began examining how social media, how technology can contribute to our anxiety and just our mental health in general. So, today we're going to continue that discussion and we're going to look at some other factors related to technology and social media and how it can impact us and our anxiety. And then we're also going to look at some antidotes and some things that we can do to help mitigate, to protect, to combat the impact of those on our life, on our mental health, on our relationships in a significant way. And so I'm super excited to be together. Let's hop right in. One of the factors that I would say is one of the biggest factors in the negative impact of social media and technology on our mental health and on our health in general. And when I say health, our physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, relational health is the lack of real connection. God absolutely created us for connection. He created us for community. We see we have a God who is three in one. He desires an intimate connection with us. I think about even the scripture where he says, that we have the people talking about like, hey, but I did this in your name and I did that in your name. And he says, yeah, but depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. Our God desires to know us. And he desires for us to be known. And the challenge with social media and technology is that it mitigates, it waters down our ability to connect and experience real connection. So, something that we need to note is that physical contact, close physical contact with other human beings, is absolutely essential. It contributes to our health and our overall well being. What happens is oxytocin, which is a hormone that God has created our bodies to release, they're released with those social contacts and those close physical contact. It's a potent anti stress hormone, and it cannot be mimicked or replicated via technology or social media. It only happens when we're physically present in close physical contact. That is where our bodies release. So when we make eye contact and we're looking at the person that we're talking to and we're engaging with them, our physical presence, maybe being able to hug the person that we're with, that releases that oxytocin, that hormone that not only makes us feel connected and bonded, it also is an anti-stress hormone, so it brings our stress levels down. That is inhibited and, well, it's prevented. It's not able to be produced when we are online. And so the the problem is when we're continuously active online, it mimics connection, right? It's an imitation. It imitates it. We feel like, man, I got all these friends and I'm connected. But the reality is, it lacks the depth, it lacks the sincerity, and it leaves an emptiness because we're missing out on the key connection that happens when we are physically present and engaged with someone. And the reality, too, is that the online communication has become more impersonal over time. So, you know, if you go if it's somebody's birthday on Facebook, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, you go to wish them a happy birthday and there's pre-selected messages. So it makes it as easy as possible, which is efficient, but again, it's not a heartfelt message, right? We're just pre-selecting a happy birthday with a couple emojis. You have AI. Right? The AI now is even generating responses and text messages and content that's not real. It's artificial intelligence, right? It mimics, it imitates, but it's artificial. It's not real. And it strips out the humanity involved and including the errors involved that create the personal connection, the heartfelt messaging from us, which is important from the person who's giving it, but it's also important for the person receiving it. And obviously we got memes, which don't get me wrong, I love a good meme, but these things are replacing the spontaneous, warm words, heartfelt words, and also from real people that we can touch, that we can talk to, that we can see. And so the reality is that all of this online communication, the social media interactions, even text messaging, emails, they've made us more accessible. They've maybe even increased the amount of communication, but they've certainly watered down the significance and the impact and the heartfelt, meaningful communication. It's stripped the emotional connection and engagement out of our communication and interactions, ours as well as others. And it's made it more kind of a trite response. It's again, it's just a lacks the emotional connection and element. And here's the thing too. Human relationships, they require good and bad interactions. It's a social skill. And so, you know, now, and I've dealt with this with clients who will say, man, I don't know. I got this text message from my, let's say, mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law sent me this long thing and I don't know how to respond, but I used AI, it generated something and it sent it off. there's a we're reciting, we're practicing, we're posing, we're giving this rehearsed, planned, posed response or text message or email to somebody, and the humanity is stripped out of it, the emotion is stripped out of it, the error is stripped out of it. And when we're not doing it face to face, we don't have to grapple with this stuff in real time. We don't have to actually deal with the messiness of relationships, the refining element of having a difficult conversation. It really just strips the emotional depth and engagement and connection out of our interactions. And so, therefore, technology and social media, it really, part of the anxiety and the disconnect from it is just the lack of real connection that comes from it. And I would say this, and I'll probably speak to this again later. You think about a text message, and I was saying this in at the conference that I spoke at. I'm like, if you send a text message to someone and say, hey, you want to get together, and they respond, sure. What happens is 80% of all communication is nonverbal. That means that 80% of what we communicate is not just the words, it is how we communicate it. It's the body language, it's the tone. So if somebody texts you, what happens is we are trying to anticipate, extrapolate, figure out what that 80% is that we're missing. So you may read that from someone and be like, sure, okay, do they really want to go? Is that a sure, like, yeah, I'm excited? Is that a sure resignation? Is that a sure, I don't want to? Whereas if you're talking to somebody, you can see if they've got a big smile on their face, like, sure, let's go. You hear you hear the tone, you see the smile, you see the excitement, you see how their face is illuminated. Also, if you're in person and somebody says to you, sure, and you kind of hear that tone and you see the hesitation on their face, the 80% is significant in how we communicate and the ability to connect with somebody and have a real connection and be like, well, do you not want to go? And you would follow that up like, why not? But again, when we text it, we miss out on that. And the same with emails and the same with Facebook comments and messages. It really dehumanizes the connection component of it. Another point, another thing about social media technology that impacts and can create anxiety is the pursuit of fake or arbitrary validation of others. We talked about this in a previous point in part one of just the social media magnifies our insecurities. And so the what happens is a lot of times we are presenting an image and we are wanting somebody to tell us you're an amazing mom. Or, I was mentioning that in part one, that as a mom, that was a struggle for me, wanting that adjustment to motherhood and really wanting to feel validated and wanting to feel like I'm doing a great job and just so wanting to be the best mom ever. So again, you may post the perfectly curated little project hoping that people will tell you, "Wow, you're the greatest mom ever." And I at the conference I posted a bunch of pictures, and you can Google this, just like social media selfie fails. I suggest that with caution because there's some that are a little inappropriate. But there was one that I posted, and it was a guy who was flexing. He had his shirt off. You could tell he was all proud of himself. He was like this macho guy with these big muscles. But in the mirror behind him, you can see that the person taking the picture was like his mom. It was this older lady, and it just was so funny. Here's this person trying to look all macho and tough and for his mom. And and there was another picture of a guy who the caption of it was like, "Oh man, my girlfriend, I get so tired of my bae, like always trying to take pictures of me." And he's kind of like has his hand up, like blocking, like, "No, don't take a picture of me." But there's a mirror in the background that shows that he's holding up the tablet and taking a picture of himself. And again, these things are humorous because it's the great efforts that we put forth to again portray, this is what I want you to think about me, this is what I'm desirable, I'm attractive, I'm yoked, I'm ripped, I'm beautiful, I'm an amazing mom. And so we post these pictures and we want people to validate us and to help us overcome our insecurities or to feed this beast of wanting to believe we're somebody that maybe we're not, but we just want the validation and that we'll take the fake, we'll take the arbitrary, we'll portray the fake, we'll portray the arbitrary because we're so consumed with an image and what we want people to think or believe. The other thing, I know that you guys understand this of you know, you go to a restaurant and if you look around, so many times I've gotten a habit of so many times I've got a habit of doing this. You look around and an entire family is on their phones. Nobody's engaged with each other. Nobody's talking to each other. Again, there's the people are on their phones instead of engaged with each other because we're wanting the pursuit of an arbitrary, a fake, an instant validation instead of communicating with people, the people right in front of us that love us, who can validate and help us to feel loved for who we really are because we're really known, not because of what we're presenting. Another aspect of this anxiety that can come about from social media and technology is just the addictive quality. Social media platforms, they ignite the same reaction in the brain as gambling, as recreational drugs do. When a person engages in a pleasurable activity, the brain releases a hormone called dopamine. Dopamine is responsible for our feeling of pleasure. And so we can do this in very constructive ways. There are things, sometimes if you work out or if you do a presentation, if you have meaningful interactions, it can create this dopamine high that makes you feel very pleasurable. And the problem is that when a person receives certain social media notifications, a like, a retweet, a comment, that the brain can increase the dopamine levels, creating a sense of pleasure, which then causes the person, when they feel that pleasurable experience and feeling, that it positively reinforces using that platform so they continue to use it and chase that dopamine high. This can happen with text messages and other messages as well. But we certainly see this with social media, that this is the rabbit hole you can get stuck in. Is I post, you like, you comment, you repost, and it gives a dopamine high, and you begin to chase that high over and over and over. You post more, you post maybe more provocative photos, you post to try to get those same amount of likes, and that's really ultimately the same amount of dopamine, right? We're wanting people to reinforce that we are good, and they create this sense of pleasure that we continue to chase over and over and over. And that is why we get addicted. That's where, I in part one I talked about the different generations, the amount of time that's spent on the phone, and the amount of people who report feeling like they're addicted to it. Gen Z, I believe it was 56% reported feeling that they were addicted. But this is a big part of it. You put something out there and you receive this instant gratifying I like you. Ooh, you're beautiful. And dopamine, poof, it's released. Feels good. I want another hit. I want another hit. And hence the addictive loop that we get stuck on when it comes to this. So, the other aspect that I would say is that we're always on. This always on phenomenon with our technology can create so much anxiety because we're expected to be available at all times to everybody. And it really, unless you have very firm boundaries around your phones, around your emails, your text messaging, your social media, what happens is you're constantly demanded and expected to be available. Back in the day, I remember as a kid, you only had a house phone. So if you left the house, nobody was getting a hold of you until you got home. You had an answering machine, and people had to leave a message and then wait. You had to write a card, you had to write a letter, and you'd have to put it in the mail and wait, and then get another letter when somebody responded and went through the mail process as well. Now, the expectation is we're always available and we're always on, and that can create a lot of anxiety because one, we feel the pressure to always be available and always be on, and oh man, they text me and I didn't respond, or I didn't respond quickly enough. But then also there's the, well, gosh, I text them, why haven't they responded? Or I sent them a friend request, why haven't they accepted it? So there's anxiety and pressure on both sides of that coin and equation, but this always on, always plugged in, but not necessarily connected can create so much anxiety, so much disconnect, so much stress, so much challenge. And so these are just some of the factors. I'm sure there's some that you've thought up that maybe I haven't mentioned, but these are some of the factors involved of why social media technology can absolutely increase our anxiety. So, we've talked about anxiety. What is it? We've talked about some of the statistics around anxiety. We've talked about statistics around social media technology and anxiety and mental health. We've talked about the factors involved and what the correlation is. What are some of the things that specifically about technology and social media that cause anxiety or mental health issues? So now I want to talk about what can we do about it because we don't want to just state the problem and not have any kind of solution. So the first thing I would say is that we have to know the risks involved with technology. We have the knowledge now. So what do we do with it? We have to know that our technology, our social media, it has a plan, it has a purpose, it has its functions. But we have to set up boundaries and put it in its rightful place and prioritize accordingly because anything out of balance is destructive. So we have to acknowledge the benefits of technology and of social media, but also acknowledge the pitfalls and the dangers of it. And that way we put parameters on it. I think a good litmus test is put your phone in another room, go in another and leave it there, go back to a different room and see how you feel for even 10 minutes. Do you feel the pull, the anxiety, the worry? Like, did somebody message me? I'm inaccessible. How does that make you feel? And I think it's a very good gauge of just how connected or addicted you are to your phone, to your apps. And from there, you've got to figure out what you got to do about it. And I would say this, detox. You have to take time periods where you do put it in another room and you leave it there, that you do turn off the notifications, that you do take a break from social media. There are times that you need to pull back, you need a limit, you need to put caps on it, you need to decide, you know what, I'm not going to take any phone calls, I'm not going to reply to any emails, I'm not going to do any texts during dinner. If we're at a meal, those phones are off. Those phones are somewhere else. If it's, social media, maybe it's like after a certain amount of time, I'm not going to do it. I know a lot of times for me, when I pick up Grayson from school, I try not to check my phone or do anything with my phone for a foreseeable amount of the afternoon. I really want to focus on him and engage with him and hear about his day and play with him and enjoy him. So you have to put it in its place. You have to set up boundaries. You have to detox. You have to take breaks from it. You have to limit your consumption because otherwise it will consume you. The other piece that's huge is that it's up to us to value genuine connection. Again, social media, texting, they're imitations of relationships without any of the substance. Make the phone call, have the actual conversation, schedule coffee, lunch, dinner, get together, engage in an actual relationship face to face. I'll say this, I think about, I was saying with the Facebook, with a birthday message, it just generates it. Maybe instead of doing that, I like to do this, which it's still a text message, but I like to do this nonetheless. I do a little video or a audio clip. I like to sing. Yes, I do that to my family and friends. I'll sing happy birthday, and then I try to tell them a handful of things that I specifically love about them and why I'm so grateful that they're alive. And so I guarantee you that is a very different experience than somebody sending me or you or a friend a kind of trite um, happy birthday message that was just pre-selected. Again, a handwritten card, it's so meaningful. I just had a conversation. I heard somebody talking about how their mom was in a nursing home and lived for handwritten cards. It kept her going. They said that it kept her going for a very long time because she just loved it and she would reread it. So these are the things. It's like reach out, schedule it face to face, get that oxytocin going, make the connection, have the actual conversation. And the reality is if we don't use our social skills, we lose them. They are skills. And so our ability to have tough conversations, our abilities to make eye contact, and we see this a lot with COVID. I mean, COVID really showed us that if you do not use it, you lose it. That your ability to engage, to smile, to look, to nod, to engage with people. If you don't use it, you lose it. And I say this with the good and the bad. Having a tough conversation face to face is really hard. But if you don't do it and you're looking for an AI generated response, you have lost the skill. And so you've got to be able to wrestle with the good and the bad that comes with the messiness of real relationships. Real relationships are incredible, but they're also hard and they do require a lot of effort and a lot of fumbling. Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a high, sometimes it's a low, sometimes it's awkward. But again, that all grows us. That grows our social skills and our ability to connect and learn and grow. So we have to value that genuine connection and the ability to connect with people socially in a meaningful way, and realizing that true relationships, they just cannot be faked or fabricated. They have to be cultivated. Real relationship, real connection comes from real effort with real people in real time. You cannot fake it. You cannot replicate it. You must just put in the effort to truly grow those relationships and those connections. And we desire it. We want it. That's why we have 5,000 friends on Facebook. We want community, but a lot of times we don't want to do what it takes to experience the connection. Really, it's not community, it's not numbers that we want, it's connection that we want. But connection only comes from real and true. And that goes into my next point. We have to value authenticity. We have to value realness. We have to stop just posting what we want to project, what we want to put in front of people. Social media is a highlight reel, right? We're just constantly putting out what is the highlights of our lives, and it's what people want us to see, what people want us to know or think about us. It's an augmented, distorted reality, and we have to remember that. And we have to remember that that's not all that we can post either. Let's be real, let's be authentic. Sometimes let's turn that camera out of the curated corner and show the mess and say, this is reality. This is a sweet little curated corner, but here is reality. I love to tell the story of one year. It was the first year I ever paid to have a mini photo shoot. And there was a lot of pressure on that because I'd paid for it. I didn't know how it was going to go. And let's just say it was disastrous. Grayson was little. He was being very difficult. I definitely cried. And there was yelling, there was tantrums by all parties involved. It was terrible, to be frank. But I remember getting the pictures back, and there's this picture. And I laughed so hard because I said, wow, our photographer was a miracle worker, because this picture was it showed Grayson on my husband's shoulders, and my husband's looking up at him, and Grayson's kind of laughing and looking down at me, and I'm looking up at him, and we look like this cute, happy little family. But the reality of what was happening in that moment was Grayson was ripping my husband's hair out. He was looking up, threatening to throw him in the lake. Not real. Nobody's really getting harmed in this. He was threatening to throw Grayson in the lake, and I was reprimanding Grayson, saying, please don't do this. Please do not do this. The picture does not tell that story, which is why I love to tell the story, because it is so crazy. And so we just have to value being real and authentic, and to be known, and realize that that is where the richness of life is being real and authentic, and knowing that people love us for who we are, the good, the bad, the ugly. And the final thing I would say is this: live with purpose. Remember that we are created by God, and for His purposes. Everything we do is meant to draw us to Him, point others to Him. 12 years was the statistic that I gave in part one, that the average American will spend 12 years of their lives looking at a phone. What if we took that 12 years and we decided, no, that's not my story. I'm going to use my unique gifts, my unique talents and abilities, and I am going to be intentional and purposeful in connecting and making a difference. I am going to spend that 12 years creating something real and beautiful, whether it is simple, whether it is elaborate, whether it is grand, whether it is everyday. But what we have to realize is God gave us a responsibility to steward, and to steward well what He's gifted us with. And I know that His desire is not for us to live on our phones, on our screens, on our social media, seeking out fake, phony, superficial deception, lies, creating anxiety and chaos and insecurity. He does not desire that for us. He wants us offline and plugged into Him, our ultimate power source, and He wants us plugged into true, genuine relationship. Our identity isn't in likes, it's not in friend counts, it's not in perfectly curated pictures or presentations of the ideal life that we want people to think that we have, or that we are working toward. No. Our identity is child of God, given unique abilities, unique gifts, unique talents, with a purpose. We have got to get offline. We have got to get plugged in to real relationship. We've got to disconnect from the addiction and the draw to fake and phony and superficial and instant. And we have got to go and get plugged in and connected with real and authentic and genuine and sincere. Friends, you were created on purpose, for a purpose. Don't waste it. Don't squander it on a phone or in an app. Go live your life with intention. You will never regret it. Well, friends, this concludes this episode of the Real Talk Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad you did. Remember, you were handcrafted by God, are dearly loved, and greatly needed in this world. We look forward to seeing you back here next time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Talk. To stay connected, follow Foundation Restoration on Instagram and Facebook at FND Restoration, or visit us at www.foundationrestoration.org for more information. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to follow or subscribe, and to leave us a 5-star review so more people can find our show. Foundation Restoration is a 501c3 nonprofit ministry that believes marriage is the heartbeat of society and exists to equip, strengthen, and restore marriages through clinical expertise and a biblical perspective. Please consider supporting our ministry with a tax-deductible donation at www.foundationrestoration.org. Your gift makes programs like this possible. Thank you for your generosity and partnership.